I'll be the one of us that's restacking the dishwasher when I'm not happy with how it's stacked. Is that, Maddie, would that, like, who's that
100%.
person? Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It's not me. I'm like a bang as much in there as you possibly can. Because my husband he sometimes says to me, like when he's unloading the dishwasher, he's like, "Do you know how a dishwasher kind of works?" Because he's like, "This is not going to get cleaned. Do you know the direction of the water?" But no, I don't, and I don't care to. Just
No.
put it
Yeah.
in there.
He handles it. How wonderful.
Oh, I know. He's a good man. But
That's
anyway, should we get off dishwashers and
Yes,
sure
spend
thing.
into the good stuff?
all
Sure
right,
thing.
yes, because we indeed have an enormous amount to cover. Dr. Libby, we are so happy to have you back on Untidy. People will know by now, my name's Hannah Davison. Kia ora, everybody. Welcome back. We're so excited. You know who I am. You know who Maddie is. But Maddie, I'll allow you to do the correct and proper intro. Go on.
Thank you very much. So my name is Matilda Green. I'm a mother of 3, content creator, podcaster. But today on the podcast, we're very excited to welcome back a good friend of the show, a fan favourite, and someone we hugely admire, Dr. Libby.
You are very kind, you two. Thank you for having me join you. Love our chats very much.
Oh, yeah, we always have such a good time. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Libby is a nutritional biochemist. She's a best-selling author. She's recently actually released her latest book, Fix Iron First, which is so great, by the way, Libby. I'm really enjoying it. And she's also the founder of the supplement range Bio Blends. Libby is known for translating quite complex science, I would say, into practical insights about women's health, particularly stress, iron, hormones, and energy. And she explores how the pace of modern life impacts our biochemistry and how we can support our bodies to really thrive. So as one of our most popular guests we've ever had, we're delighted to have you back. And I'm just going to say there's a lot we want to get through, Libby, because I did say on my Instagram, I said, let us know if there's any questions for Dr. Libby. We're having her on the podcast. And we got a lot. We got a lot of questions. And some of them were kind of like, here's my symptoms, what do I have and what do I do about it? So they're a little individualized, and so we have done our best to go through as many as we can so we can answer them. But yes, there were some that we probably won't be able to get to because they'll be a whole podcast in themselves. But let's kick off with a bit of ADHD chat, shall we?
Yeah, and I'll be the expert on the from an anecdotal point of view on ADHD. Libby, we want to start with handling our busy brains, in particular ADHD, and that's something that I've been diagnosed with last year. It's something I see very much in my cookie cutter daughter, and it seems like there is discussion about it everywhere. I don't know if that's because like the algorithm has now been like, oh, we see you, and here's some
you're
more.
interested in that, are you?
Yeah, but are we seeing more ADHD, or are we just recognizing it properly?
So I think right now the jury's out and all on that answer. I think all that matters is people get the help that they need and people feel understood and supported and like that they lose the belief that there's something wrong with them. So if they've felt like they observe that they're different from their friends in how they operate, I feel that it's, you can feel very isolated in that. So what I care way more about is that people, feel, I guess, that they can embrace who they are and that there's nothing wrong. It's just that perhaps some different support steps need to be taken for the ADHD brain, which is what I'm all about. And I think when we start to talk about ADHD and anxiety, there's a tendency in our culture right now to go down a purely psychological or psychiatric road. And that's obviously immensely beneficial. And a lot of people need that and thrive from going down that road. Where I guess when I come at it from my angle, so when I look at nutrition, when I look at biochemistry, I worry that the pieces we're missing in these conversations around ADHD, for example, is the difference nutrition can make to that. So we know, for example, that, and Maddie, you mentioned iron a minute ago with Fix Iron First, but honestly, you're going to have to stop me because iron is literally essential for us to be able to produce dopamine. And so it's almost like iron is a dopamine gatekeeper for the neurodivergent mind. And that's because iron is required there's an enzyme with a big, silly scientific fancy name called tyrosine hydroxylase. And that's needed It's the rate limiting enzyme that converts a thing called tyrosine into dopamine. And we know that for ADHD people, that happens differently. But where I'm going with this is that if an ADHD brain doesn't have enough iron available to it, then dopamine synthesis slows, baseline motivation drops, restless compensation increases, cognitive stamina declines. And so that's particularly relevant to an ADHD brain because there's already challenges with dopamine. So we could just do a podcast about that. But it's
that's
mind-blowing.
amazing.
It's really mind-blowing. Yeah.
That is really fascinating. So when you talk about an ADHD brain, what are we actually talking about? What are what's happening in that brain?
So this is, I guess, more the psychology road, but they'll diagnose based on symptoms and with a questionnaire. And people will feel, for example, Hannah, you're probably best to speak to this. You feel like there's a restlessness, there's jumping from one thing to another, can't finish a task, timekeeping is tricky, although I think probably you've developed that skill of timekeeping, what we were talking about up there with
I like to push it hard to the final. I don't know why I do that, but yeah.
Well, now we do know why.
We do know why. We do know why. Because but also maybe, Libby, you could talk about why people with ADHD push right to the final moment that they would possibly be able to do something to create this pressure that then creates the focus.
Yeah. And I also think it creates a feeling, Hannah. I think it creates it gives you a dopamine hit when you've really pushed something to the limit. There was like a maybe, am I going to get this done? And you do it. So it's the intense focus, but it's also the feeling you get from doing it that way. It's like, I rock. Look at that.
The payoff.
The payoff, I think, is massive. And that is a dopamine hit. So there's a lot of research been done, particularly in children diagnosed with ADHD and their nutritional status. And there's a terrific research organisation headed up by Julia Ruckledge in Christchurch looking at essentially mental health and nutrition. So people can go and find her work. It's exceptional, and obviously way more conversations are needed around this. But because iron deficiency is the most common nutritional deficiency in the world, I worry that there are children, for example, as well as adults, including adult women, who, yes, they're diagnosed with ADHD and they need all the supports that come from understanding that from a psychological perspective. But if you're not addressing the iron deficiency that possibly also coexists, then it's almost like an uphill battle. So there's great research showing that some of the symptoms we associate with ADHD hugely decrease. Even restless legs, the restlessness in the body can really start to settle when iron status is improved. So it's very much worth looking at for people with ADHD.
Yeah, because I've had low iron all my life, to the point of being anemic on a number of occasions. It's always been very difficult to get it up, even though, I eat meat. I also now take iron supplements, but it was always difficult to actually raise it. And also, you go to the doctor and you get your bloods done and they're like, well, it's within the normal range. But the thing is, the normal range isn't the optimal range. It's just like, we're not going to medicate you for where you are, or you're not, clinical.
You're walking around, you're all right.
Yeah, like you're upright. That's it. So I mean, for everybody, but then is it more so for ADHD people? Like, where is the optimal level? How do we find that? It's
so important, Hannah, this conversation. So thank you for raising it. When we test for iron studies, there are 4 different tests. There's serum iron, which is a reflection of recent dietary intake. Then there's a thing called transferrin. Transferrin is like a taxi that drives iron around. So transferrin goes high when the body is seeking more iron, because the body's going to make more taxis to try to pick up more passengers. The passengers obviously is iron. Mm-hmm. So transferrin will elevate when your body seeks more iron. Then there's a thing called saturation, which is how many passengers are in the taxi. And then this big one, ferritin. So ferritin is your iron storage, how much, it's like your backup battery, if you like. And when the normal range in New Zealand pathology labs for adult women for ferritin is 20 to 220 micrograms per litre. And in my clinical experience, and there's chunks of research to support this, when ferritin is less than 50, people have usually symptoms of iron deficiency. So their hemoglobin might still be normal, but when ferritin is low, that's when even things like dopamine synthesis can slow. And if you don't have ADHD, you might just notice that as, I have a little bit less focus and less motivation, but I'm still okay. Whereas a person with ADHD will really feel that when their ferritin is low. So, and that's when the concentration can hugely drop. There are all sorts of symptoms where iron deficiency mimics some symptoms of ADHD, even though they're completely separate things. So it's being able to tease them apart. But those optimum ranges, we want the ferritin to be between 50 and 150 micrograms per litre. So that's what you're looking for.
God, this is so fascinating. So do you think there is a bit of a misunderstanding around iron? Because I think people think, right, I'm feeling a bit tired, I'm low in iron, I'll have some red meat, I'll have some spinach, and that's me done. But after having a look and reading Fix Iron First, there are so many there are so many kind of barriers that could lead to low iron, right? Or iron absorption. And I know you've written an entire book about this, and it can be really hard to put it into a podcast, but can you give us like a taster or an example of what some of these barriers can be?
Absolutely. So firstly, it's actually astonishing how much iron an adult female across the menstruation years needs to consume through her food. So we need 18 milligrams per day just to prevent deficiency. And to put that into context, it's just over half a kilogram of beef per day will meet that. Now, I'm not saying people do that. I'm just sort of demonstrating it's actually a lot that we need to eat in a day to meet our needs. So number one, I think a lot of women don't actually eat enough iron-rich foods, and it's just a straightforward lack of intake. Because I don't meet a lot of women who eat for satiety. I don't meet a lot of women who eat for robust health and energy. A lot of women are still on some level kind of watching what they eat, restricting in some way because they're trying to control body shape and size. So when that, and I've, in blanket terms, I refer to that as dieting mentality. So when we kind of get stuck in that, it can be very hard to meet our iron. It's hard enough for a meat and potatoes eater to kind of get enough iron going in each day, let alone someone who's restricting in some way. So that's the first thing. It can be lack of dietary intake. The second thing is absorption, Maddie, as you said. So obviously our gut health has a really big impact on iron absorption. And the first thing we need is really robust stomach acid production. So stomach acid is supposed to have a super low pH, about 1.9, which if it touched your fingertips, it would burn you like carboxylic acid, but we need it to be really acidic so that we can actually make sure iron is in the form that the human body can absorb. So robust stomach acid. And then there can be inflammation in the gut for a range of different reasons. It can be because we're eating too much ultra-processed food or takeaway food or drinking too much alcohol. Or the way I kind of phrase it broadly is we might not be eating in a species-specific way. In other words, we're not eating what humans are probably supposed to eat, and that can drive some inflammation, or there can be some kind of infection there. In blanket terms, let's just call it a parasite infection, but some kind of disruption to the gut microbiome that is not ideal. All of that can create inflammation, and then that leads the liver. Lots of science here, but that leads the liver to produce a little protein called hepcidin, which blocks iron absorption. So even though your body might desperately need the iron, if there's inflammation, it can be blocked just through what's going on in the gut with that inflammation. So they're two big, and let me do the third one. It can be significant iron loss with really heavy periods. So whatever is leading to the lousy iron state, we want to address that thing, whether it's low intake, gut health, or heavy periods, to see if we can make a difference. And then, of course, we want good quality supplementation if that's needed as well. But just before I move on from that, because I know I'm on a bit of a rant right now, but it's very important that I think everyone knows nothing in the body stands alone. So iron doesn't operate on its own. It has a lot of nutrients as friends. In its little gang, it needs copper, it needs vitamin A, so it has a lot of little nutritional friends that are just as important, that we're getting enough of those. And when we're eating plenty of whole real food, we tend to have more of a chance of getting those things. But too many people these days don't eat enough whole real food. It's a big problem.
No, well, It feels like this is something that I'm learning more and more, kind of the older and busier I get, is just how intentional we need to be with nutrition. Like if it's an afterthought, you just can't get enough because, like if we're kind of out and about in the city and I'm not prepared, there's nowhere to go that I can get good quality whole foods. There's like one place that is about $40 for a salad. So you really do have to be prepared and intentional. And I think that's what we need to kind of spread far and wide about how this needs to be a priority for us. Because, especially when you're juggling family life and home life and work, it can fall off the back burner so easy. And you think, oh, I'll just grab a piece of toast or whatever, it doesn't matter. But God, it does. There's a hilarious video online actually about this woman who says basically the amount of protein you need is you just multiply the grams by the amount of stars in the sky, and that's how much you need, because it does seem like we need almost an obscene amount. It's so high, isn't it? Like 1.5 grams per kg now, I think.
It's, I mean, there's ranges depending on how much activity you're doing. There are ranges. I worry a little bit, Maddie, to be honest, that and I guess social media has its drawbacks and benefits, doesn't it? Because we can learn a lot, but it can also make us feel like we're kind of not doing the right things, or that there's just, way too much. And I recently did a survey of people in my community about what they want to learn about. And one of the things that, I was just asking for sort of feedback. And one of the things people struggle with is all of that noise that's out there and trying to make sense of what is conflicting information. And I think that, so when we talk about, do we need X amount of protein, there will be certainly situations, particularly for athletes, or someone might have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, or they have insulin resistance, where that's actually really an important priority. Whereas I think that we need to kind of put the brakes on a little bit with our obsession with protein, to be honest, because there's not very many people who are truly deficient in it. They might not be eating exactly the right amount or exactly enough, and it can help a lot of people to prioritize protein. So I like to encourage people to think of it that way. Prioritize it. You don't need to obsess about it and measure and weigh and stress if you didn't hit your targets that day, because that is the stress that it creates is way worse for people if they're not meeting those targets, So
yeah.
we need to listen to ourselves as women. Of course, men have it as well, but there's a voice inside of us that has our back. We actually know what to eat, what to do, when to move, when to get off our computers, when to go to bed. And we just don't always tune into that voice. And sometimes we can't, because you have to meet the needs of young humans and they're your priority. You can't always listen to that voice within yourself, of course. But I feel we're in this cultural little moment where we're kind of outsourcing everything, like literally tell me what to do, tell me how to live. And we lose touch with our own value systems and our own authenticity and how we might want to operate. And it also means that because we need to let ourselves off the hook sometimes. Yes, I'm going to contradict myself now and say, yes, we need some, standards of care, prioritize caring for yourself and appreciating yourself really deeply, but also don't beat yourself up if there's a day where you don't hit your protein targets.
It's so true. Like, we just are so hard on ourselves all the time on performing on everything. It's just like, and then you sort of see you have these expectations on you, and then you just get into a mindset sometimes where you're like, well, I'm just failing at everything, like I just can't
Get my protein, can't get enough exercise, can't
clean the toilet. It's just like, I can't, and it's so true that actually if you just stop, I think, in this modern age, our brains, which haven't actually changed since, modern humans developed to this point, are taking in so much information that you can't hear what's happening on the inside, and the instinct and the intuition, which just needs a little bit of space for you to actually be able to tune in. And it's like this whole modern world just completely distracts us from being able to access these capabilities which we are designed to have.
Yeah. And that we do have.
Yeah. We'll get back to iron in a minute, but I just have one more part of this tangent that I want to talk about, and it's the same with exercise. You know, there are so many podcasts around telling us how we need to exercise to prevent dementia, to this, to that, to this, and so I'm like, okay, so I need 3 intense strength sessions, and then I'll need some zone 5 because that's better for women than zone 2. Zone 2 is for men, and so, but then, and it's a lot. But then the other day, because we've set up this little exercise area in our garage, and I got down there and I was like, okay, I haven't done an intense strength session, so I'll do that. And I put some music on, and then I just kind of danced around for a bit and like did a bit of rowing, and then I did a bit of tinkering around with something, and it was so fun. And I moved the whole time. I just danced around for half an hour and put on some good music. It's like, let's just do that. You know what I mean? Like, why can't we just sometimes just do a bit of movement how we want to do it? And it doesn't have to be the perfect workout schedule, perfect, weight training. You just move how you want to move.
Because you're so much more likely to go back to the garage and do that again because it felt good. And it's what we consistently do that creates our health and well-being. Whereas if it feels like you're fighting an uphill battle, you're not necessarily going to keep going with it. You'll fall off, it just falls away. So I'm all for dancing.
Yeah. Bring back dancing, I say. Anyway, back to iron. So what about children with ADHD? We touched on that before. So how do we know what they're kind of deficient in? But because as we were saying, like you can get blood tests at the GP, but that's not necessarily optimal. So then do you have to kind of test everything or can you go for a bit of a blanket approach and think, well, let's just supplement you with this in case you are deficient and it may help?
So with iron, it is better to know if someone is deficient before supplementing. Mm-hmm. So the body does have a mechanism to block absorption if there's already too much in there. But it's important to, if someone already has really terrific iron status, you don't want to supplement that. So it is better to know. The trick with little children, obviously, and this is where it's up to the parents to, I think, assess whether a blood test is going to really distress a child or if the child would find it an adventure. So that's where I think, parental discernment is important here, because there are obviously pediatricians, dietitians, nutritionists. They are trained to actually see the signs of iron deficiency. So they have a checklist. There's actually one on the BioBlend's website that you can go to, a checklist of symptoms of iron deficiency for adults and for children. And if you tick quite a few of the boxes, if a child ticks a lot of those boxes, then they're going to be iron deficient. So if it would be really distressing for them to have a blood test, then you can pretty much assume that it's time to really focus on making sure their diet is, they're getting enough through their food, but supplementation may be required. So that's sort of at the discernment, I think, of the parents and the health professional looking after the child. But it's so common. It's actually really deeply concerning around, so when at birth, let's even backtrack it. During pregnancy in the 3rd trimester, the baby in utero, its liver is really on a growth spurt. And that's where iron is being accumulated, so that then when the baby is born, the mother will confer some of her iron stores at birth. So that's called the fetal endowment. But if the mum is already iron deficient, which way too many mothers are iron deficient when they are giving birth, they don't give that fetal endowment to the baby, and the baby's got to rely on what it's accumulated in its liver. If it's born prematurely, there's usually not enough there, because breast milk doesn't contain iron for a very specific reason, and the baby's supposed to rely on what it has, what it was born with, for the first 6 months until complementary foods are then introduced. And the trick too is that I don't feel like this is talked about enough, that at that 6 month, when food solids are being introduced, there needs to be an enormous focus on iron-rich foods, because that little human needs between 9 and 11 milligrams of iron every single day, and they're only 6 months old. And if they're iron deficient, it impacts IQ development that little human never, ever gets back. And I hate saying it, and it's not a guilt trip, it's for awareness, because we're not talking about it. So we need, when in the 70s, when I was growing up, I can remember being dragged to the doctor when I was 14 for a blood test for iron. And it's almost like other nutrients have become trendier, you know, protein, creatine, vitamin D, magnesium, and they're all important. Yes, it's all important, but we're missing some really basic stuff, and iron deficiency in adults, but also in children, it's being missed. A girlfriend of mine wanted to better understand what was happening with her little boy's health and toddled off to the GP. And she said to the GP, is it possible that he's iron deficient? And the GP's response was, every child is these days. And so she obviously is seeing a huge, you know, group of the population, and that's just unacceptable to me. And it's pretty heartbreaking, because those little bodies, as their brain is developing, as their nervous system continues to develop, it's not getting what it needs if they're iron deficient. So yeah, we can assess through symptoms, and then we want to make sure that it's corrected as soon as possible.
Oh, that's so fascinating. Are there other nutritional deficiencies that can also commonly exacerbate things like people are dealing with, like focus issues and mood swings and overwhelm? You know, like you've got your iron sorted, say, what's next?
So it's because it's such a tent pole, that iron deficiency, because it affects absolutely everything in the body. It's almost hard for me to come down off that, blathering on about that. But the next one is zinc. So there are many nutrients where there might be an insufficiency, but it's not a true deficiency. So iron is a state where we can be truly deficient. Zinc we can be truly deficient in, whereas others like magnesium, we're usually not fully deficient in magnesium, but there can be an insufficiency, for example, to meet our requirements. So when, for example, our main food sources of magnesium are green leafy vegetables, nuts and seeds, particularly pumpkin seeds. And in New Zealand, we, as adults, less than 1 in 10 adults eats the recommended 5 serves of vegetables per day. So if we're not hitting those vegetable consumption targets, there is, you know, we're just not going to be getting enough magnesium. So then when I talk to people about magnesium, there's all this confusion around the form to take. You know, do I take citrate, oxide, glycinate, malate, orotate, you know? Well, and so they're all synthetic and they're made in a lab. BioBlends are all made from food. That's their big point of difference, because I think I want to give the body what it recognizes, what it's always recognized, which is nutrition from food. But anyway, with the synthetic ones, the magnesium is just magnesium, but what it's coupled with, that other thing can also have its own activity, if you like. So we know that glycine can have a very calming effect, which is why magnesium glycinate is the synthetic version that's often recommended for sleep. So it's a massive can of worms, I think. And with our requirements for magnesium, yes, we might not be eating enough because we're not eating enough veggies, for example, but also caffeine increases magnesium's excretion. So the more caffeine we have, the more we're going to wee out. Stress hormones increase our demand for magnesium. So when we're living on adrenaline and cortisol, which a lot of people are these days, their requirements for magnesium are even greater. So you can end up with that wired but tired kind of state where you just can't calm down. And those 3 minerals I just met that we've talked about, so iron, zinc, and magnesium, all of them are in different ways involved in the production of all of our neurotransmitters, like dopamine that we've already focused on quite a bit, GABA, which is our chill pill, the calming one, serotonin is for contentment, and melatonin for sleep. So iron, magnesium, and zinc are the real key minerals for the body to literally be able to construct those neurotransmitters and exert the effects of them. So
you talked about the sort of optimal levels for iron, particularly for people with ADHD. If we're getting regular blood tests, what are the optimal levels? Can they test for magnesium as well? Like, what are the optimal levels for zinc and magnesium? Like, how can we see?
So magnesium is really tricky to test for, because the blood most of the magnesium in the body is not in the blood. And so the body will always maintain just a tiny amount in the blood. So I am yet to meet anyone whose serum magnesium is out of the normal range, because they're usually in hospital if that's the case, with big problems because their kidneys aren't regulating their mineral levels. whereas there's more magnesium obviously inside our cells, in our bones and in other tissues. And so a blood test that might give us a bit more insight into our magnesium status is what's called red blood cell magnesium. I really hesitate, Hannah, in, I guess, sort of talking about, we've got to talk about it, but we would, if you want that test done, you will have to pay for it. It's really tricky for our doctors to not get into trouble requesting tests like this. And so when I bring some of these nutritional themes to life, I'm very, very mindful of, I guess, the pressure or the really tricky situation it can put our GPs in, where they're not really allowed to test for things like that unless it's really warranted. And into what's known as an integrative GP, they're a lot more likely to do those sorts of tests. But you can organize it yourself. So you can actually request a red blood cell magnesium test. But again, you've got to decide where you spend your money. So I'm much more with something like magnesium, rather than someone testing it, I would rather run off symptoms. So some of the symptoms of deficiency: does your eye twitch? Do you get leg cramps? Do you get heart palpitations? Heart palpitations obviously can be caused by all sorts of things. So including iron deficiency. There's a bit of overlap there. So I think it's wiser to potentially work with a nutrition expert one-on-one who knows what all the symptoms of all the deficiencies look like. And yeah, I think, or if you're a really keen, I guess, someone who loves going down a rabbit hole and looking at things for yourself, then by all means, you'll know if you're not hitting your dietary intake targets, for example. And so therefore there might be an insufficiency. So you improve your diet or you take a supplement. And I would suggest someone take a food sourced supplement, not a synthetic one. But yeah, that's what people want to do.
No, that's really helpful. And why is it that, when we get to perimenopause and we have those hormonal shifts, it just seems to exacerbate every single thing that we might have been just carrying on with before, your mood and focus and everything else? Because I think I pretty much managed ADHD most of my life. Well, also it wasn't really picked up as a child in my day. But then once I hit perimenopause, it was like I couldn't ignore what was going on anymore.
So one of my ideas around this, Hannah, and again, this is a whole podcast really.
We need a series.
one of the things I think that happens, so progesterone is this most magnificent hormone, and we make a lovely big surge of it after we ovulate. And so when we first go into our perimenopause transition, the first change that happens is we stop ovulating every month. So you might ovulate 1 month and not the next, and then you might ovulate for the next 3 months, and then you'll miss the next 2. So it becomes quite random. And on the months where you do ovulate, you get all the lovely effects of progesterone, which is it converts into a substance that then binds to GABA receptors, GABA being that lovely calming effect on the nervous system, which is partly why it helps us to sleep so beautifully. And so then on the months where you don't ovulate, you haven't got that lovely anti-anxiety effect, that lovely calming, soothing, life is just beautiful. You haven't got that anymore. That's missing that month. And some women, not all, but some women notice that profoundly. So I feel like with what you just described, Hannah, where it just became so evident, you'd kind of managed it until that point. It's like progesterone had buffered you from experiencing what was already kind of there. And so I feel like right now there's 4,000 conversations out there happening around perimenopause. And my concern is there's a lot of good that women get the help and the support they need. My concern is I now meet women in their 30s who are absolutely terrified of it. And that is heartbreaking. It is not supposed to, you don't need to be frightened of it. I want to shift the conversation almost to, for those who are frightened because they've just had so much fear shoved at them through their algorithm, basically, what can you do to support a really healthy menstrual cycle across the menstruation years? Because it usually will mean that your perimenopause transition is far gentler. Because I worry, not always, but mostly, I worry that when we say something is due to perimenopause, we're saying it's because of changes in our sex hormones. And there's this tendency right now for women between really about the ages of 35 or 38 all the way up to about 55 that anything new you get, a sore foot, itchy ears, anything, it's anything new, it's perimenopause because I'm in that age bracket kind of thing. Well, maybe it is due to changes in sex hormones. I'm not denying that. Of course, I've written books about the effects that they have, but there's just this blanket target on them right now. And so and you could be missing that your thyroid's not working as well as it once did. It could be insulin resistance. It could be that you need to have a really difficult conversation with someone you love that you've been putting off. And so the stress inside you is so massive. There's 1,000 metabolic things. There's 1,000 emotional things. And I feel that it's almost like when those sex hormones start to change, we can no longer deny what already exists. You can't hide from your iron deficiency anymore. You can't hide from insulin resistance or a thyroid or what's happening in your nervous system with an ADHD type scenario. And so rather than seeing it as this dreadful, horrible experience, hallelujah that the light is being shone on something for you to work on. It gives me goosebumps when I talk about it. Everything unfolds for us. It's not happening to us. It's this extraordinary opportunity for us to see what's really there and become even more of who we are. And that deepens our relationships with other people. It deepens our connection to ourselves and helps us, I think, to tune back into what our extraordinary earth suit needs. So whether someone is suffering in a debilitating way, in a mild way, or not at all, it's this glorious, I just see it as this glorious opportunity to learn some new things. And when we learn things as women, none of us are quiet about it. We pass it on. So also too, can I add that there are lots of women who are going through their perimenopause transition with no symptoms and no suffering, but we don't hear from them. And when I've asked them why they don't share it, they just say, well, I've got nothing to say. And some of them will say, I don't share it because I'm actually a bit embarrassed. I feel bad that I'm not suffering because my friends are suffering. So I just want women out there who are, for example, in their 30s or even in their 40s, please don't expect it to be awful. You might not have any suffering at all, or it might be very mild. And if it's mild or it's debilitating, there's so much help available now because we're having these conversations.
And God, that's such a beautiful way to look at it. Because you're right, it's almost like we weren't talking about it enough. And now we're talking about it so much that it becomes this big thing. And you're right, that the algorithm feeds off it. It's exactly, well, I kind of look at it the same as childbirth, because when a woman has a traumatic experience during childbirth, there's not a lot of ways to process that other than talking about it, right? And so then we kind of get this situation where all of these women that have had a traumatic experience birthing a child are talking about it because they need to process it. It's our way of getting through it. And so we hear a lot about those stories, and then it creates this fear around it, and it's this whole thing, whereas actually it's nothing to be afraid of. It's a beautiful thing, but it's just getting the positive stories out there as well so we can balance it out so that we don't create too much fear. You were talking about supporting women to work in their menstrual cycles and keep their bodies as balanced as they can heading into perimenopause. And one thing I want to talk to you about is stress management, because I think stress is just a part of life, obviously, but there was a time personally last year that I got really stressed, and I'm seeing the effects of that kind of now. Like half my hair fell out, I got proctitis, it was a whole thing. But I consider myself pretty calm and okay at managing stress. And I thought, well, if I can't handle one stressful year, like there's going to be many of those. How do I thrive when there is this stress around me or pressure around me that there's nothing I can do about? And so many listeners will have that as well, have really stressful jobs, busy family life. How do they thrive in that kind of environment? How do we look after ourselves?
I love to, rather than say manage stress, I don't think is working out for any of us very well. I like to, I guess, go deeper and see if we can address it from where it's being created. So I think to have a conversation around stress, I think it's really important to acknowledge that there is very real and genuine stress going on in people's lives and in the world right now. There's a lot of genuine stress. There is, however, a lot of stress we create for ourselves because of how we think, and that's what we can change. So when I have these conversations around stress, I want to be very respectful of genuine stress versus the stress that, we kind of, what we do to ourselves. I also think there's a tendency right now for us to think that stress comes from everything outside of us. It comes from that situation or that person or the family that lives in that house down the road and their barking dog. So we think that it's all coming from outside of us. And what we lose sight of is that it's actually our response to the person or the situation or the family with the barking dog. And when we can see that, it can start to change our perception of, I think, what we call stress. Because when I look at stress, I think, is a life being threatened? Is a life in danger? So a genuine stress might be, in modern times, might be a car drives out in front of you and you've got to suddenly slam on your brakes. That sort of scenario is why we have stress hormones, and it will save our life in that situation because there's no thought, foot on brake, it's just boom, automatic. Obviously, where the challenges come from is we now live in a world that is biochemically so mismatched to what our nervous system requires. So that's why I like to say to a person, let's get curious about what leads you as an individual to produce stress hormones, and let's change the ones we can. Some of them we can't change, but some we can. The goal is not zero for all the A-type personalities listening. It's that doesn't need to be the goal, but we want to take a bit of a load off the earth suit, making them all the time and making so many. So let's examine that. What leads us to produce stress hormones? Everybody block your ears, because my first answer is caffeine. Caffeine literally
Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, I knew. I just dig myself that hole every time. No one wants to hear it, but there it is. So the human body literally, when it consumes caffeine binds to the adenosine receptors in the brain, and that sends a message to the adrenal glands, produce adrenaline. The next thing that leads us to produce adrenaline are what I can broadly say are our perceptions of pressure and urgency. So let's say you get up in the morning and you have a coffee or two and you've got your to-do list in front of you and you feel like your day is jam-packed. And then you open your laptop and you see that there's 400 new emails that have come in overnight, but your day's already jam-packed and you don't know where on earth you're going to get the time to deal with those emails. So you've made even more adrenaline usually with that sort of heightened response. Then I'll give you this little example. Let's make it real world. So across the years recently, where a lot of people started working from home, when I was supporting people across that time, and I would ask them, tell me about your stress. Give me an example. And a lot of people gave a version of, well, I'm working from home and a colleague rang me and said, where's that work? I needed it yesterday. So when I speak to a live audience, I'll often use this as an example and I'll say, could you please raise your hand if that example would stress you out? And about 3/4 of the room put their hand up. And I say, thank you. Now please raise your hand if that would not stress you out, if a colleague rang and said, where's that work? And about 1/4 of the room put their hand up. And that's how you know it's not real. That's how you know your stress is coming from your thinking, when not everyone sees it the same way. So what is it about the people who find that stressful? It's because we don't actually hear what someone says. We hear what we think they meant. So in other words, we hear the request for the work from the colleague, but if you find it stressful, what we also do is put a comma in that, they've asked for the work. So therefore they think I'm not a team player, I'm inefficient, I'm not a hard worker, I'm hopeless at my job. So we judge ourselves, and that's what makes it stressful. And we do that to ourselves all day, and it creates this perception of pressure and urgency in a day where, with using that example, it doesn't need to be that. It could just be that colleague is trying to be efficient, trying to look good to the boss. They haven't, they're not thinking we're a terrible person at all. So that's another little category. And then the third category that I think is really helpful for us to unpack when we're trying to get really clear on what leads us as an individual to produce stress hormones is essentially where we consciously or unconsciously worry what other people think of us. So when I wrote The Invisible Load in 2019, I did focus groups with women of all different ages prior to that. And the 18 to 25-year-olds, their two top stressors, and remember this was 2019, which feels like 2 minutes ago, but it's a while ago now. But the 18 to 25-year-olds in 2019 said their two top stressors were body image and social media. And when I share that to, say, an older group of people, they don't understand how social media can be a stress because they're using it to send photos to their family in England or, I watch wombat videos. I think they're hilarious. So it's entertainment. It's not stressful. So when we look at it like that, our stress can be this glorious opportunity for us to see where we are kind of allowing others to judge us. And that's it's not an easy road to go down because all those patterns get set up when we're little humans, and those patterns get set up. They're kind of adaptations to ensure that we were able to fit in or be liked or be a functional member of a family that might have been a bit dysfunctional, for example. So our stress can be this glorious teacher if we allow it to be. So that's the deeper work that I really love to encourage people to do. But then in a lifestyle sense, it's when you might have a parent who's dying, you might feel quite unwell yourself. You might have little children who need you. You might be so deeply saddened by things you're witnessing in the world. So when it feels like it's just all consuming and the strategies we've just talked about aren't going to cut it, or there's just not the emotional bandwidth to do that deep dive, that's where I encourage people to just do the basics. Ask yourself, what do I really care about? What matters to me? And whatever those are, and it might be, what matters to me are my children, my relationship with my partner, and being able to pay the mortgage. That might be, you distill it to that. Okay, the wheels feel like they're falling off. I have very little bandwidth left. I'm just going to do those things. Anything else right now, the answer's no. And I will become your best friend again in 3 months' time when I've come through this kind of thing. And people understand when you kind of got to batten down the hatches and go a bit in to just get through some really tough stuff. When we feel like we've got to endlessly meet the needs of other people, other than baby humans who literally require that so they can survive, but when we feel like we've got to, be all things to all people, that's when we're going through really tough things ourselves. That's where we need to seek the understanding of others. And that's hard. Some women find that very difficult to ask for.
I think this is such an important conversation, particularly, I mean, I've just had a bout of complete overwhelm, total meltdown, lost an entire weekend. And I think sometimes when you're used to being in a place where your plate is full, you're busy, you're coping, your mental load is carrying the schedules and the needs and, emotionally bolstering 3 or 4 people plus pets plus whatever's going on in your life plus work, and it's just it's all too much. But it's like when you hit that point of overwhelm, collapse, I don't know what anyone else might choose to call it, it's like it sneaks up on you. You think you're fine, you think you've got it, you think you feel normal, and then something snaps, and then it's like an implosion. And so I'm really glad that you just shared that advice of it is okay to simplify your life right down and shut everything out and just be like, that can wait because this is the only thing that I've got bandwidth for. And I think part of the trick is how do we recognize that moment is coming and intervene first? The other thing I'm confused about is when that happens, it's like all of the things that you need to tend to, then they balloon to the same level of priority. It's like, oh, the child needs this, but also the toilet is dirty and I can't cope with any of it. And they all seem to be life or death. What is going on?
The dirty toilet example is just gold.
I know. I feel like you've really got an issue with your toilet at the moment, Hannah. It's
I
like,
can't get to
really-
the bathrooms.
Well, I think when it's almost like I had this conversation with a girlfriend yesterday. She was describing a very similar scenario, Hannah, and she's just been running so fast. And she said, and I don't know if anyone else can see it, but inside it's so intense. And I think we need to catch ourselves when we feel that intensity really elevate and see if we can, no judgment on ourselves, just, right, this is so intense right now. What can I do? Because the wheels will, if you know that the wheels will come off, this intensity is my little red light, little flashing light at me right now. So what can I do? Do I need to bunker down? Do I need to? And I think recognizing that, I wrote about it in Rushing Woman Syndrome in 2011. As women, we triage our lives. It's like, right, you see that you've got a rug that's torn. I know I need to repair the rug because someone's going to trip on it. But then, oh no, suddenly a child's broken their arm. Oh no, now we're off to the hospital. This child's got the broken arm. And you forget about the rug, but then probably someone will eventually. So it's like we triage, like we've got to manage the urgency of the thing that needs our attention. And what you're saying, Hannah, is that sometimes when we're in this kind of collapsy, overwhelming sort of state, it's almost like the child's requirements are on par with the toilet needs cleaning.
Yeah, and then suddenly, like you've actually lost sight of the ability to triage because nothing is working.
So we want to. I feel like we need to recognize in ourselves when that intensity is mounting, and make a change then and there. So is it that some appointments need to get cancelled so that you can just stay home? I'm a home person. When I feel that escalation in me, that's my strategy. I'm staying home. Whereas for other people, that might not be the right, an extrovert might become completely miserable if they do that. They might need their favorite person who they can really be open and honest with and have a massive download to them about how intense it feels in their brain. It's finding your outlet for that intensity so that the wheels don't eventually get to come off. I would also add, and I can't help myself here, I'm really obsessed right now with resilience as not just an emotional experience, but also a physical one. And I worry that as a society, we've lost it a little bit. And so if I just focus on the physical side of things, like what the role nutrition, because that's my lane, the role nutrition plays in resilience. So feeling like you are strong in your body. And when we feel like we're strong in our body, I don't mean with muscles, I mean, it's like there's an inner fortitude of, this is really hard for me right now, but I have got this. I know I have got this. And I know I will see it differently in a week or a month. But I have got this and I can get through this. It's like this inner dialogue of belief in yourself. And that is another reason why I'm obsessed with iron. In Fix Iron First, I wrote, and people, if you've seen these words in the book, it probably just seems like Libby had a crazy moment and popped some random quote in, and it says, iron is forged in the hottest part of the fire. And I included that because when we go through hard things, we have the opportunity for that to fortify us rather than deplete us. And that's where I think when we have great iron status, when our bone marrow has plenty of iron to make new red blood cells, for a start, the iron's being given to the thyroid to make its hormones, to the brain to be able to produce its dopamine and all the things it needs. When we have that really robust iron status, our inner fortitude is more robust. So it's another reason I'm obsessed with iron, because when we have good iron status, it's kind of like those really difficult times in life can fortify us rather than deplete us. I'm not saying it's a solution for everything, of course, but it massively helps. And it's knowing that it's kind of like, I've got this. This is so hard right now, and I really don't feel like I'm coping, and that's okay. But there's a voice in you that's saying, you will get through this. Might get a bit messy, and the toilet's probably going to stay dirty.
It did.
See?
And that's fine.
And it was all okay.
I'm still here.
Yeah. It's not easy, but it's trusting that we'll get through it, and the sunshine will become brighter again on the other side.
Oh, I really love that, because you always get that feeling on the other side, don't you? Where you think, God, that was a lot, but here we are, we got through it and everything is fine. And so it's almost like looking back to be able to remember that feeling when you're in it again, to just be like, remember last time when I got through that little bump and I came through the other side and I was absolutely fine, and sure, it wasn't perfect, but we got through it. I found that really helpful as a parent, actually, as well. Like, where there's times where I'm like, this is so much. Like, there's, whether it's cacophony of people losing it, or burning dinner, like everything's all go, and I've forgotten appointments, which, gosh, I mean, don't even get me started on that. And I can just go, it's all right, I'm the parent, I got this. And it's just this like little voice that is like, it's fine, I can handle this. I can handle lots of things. What's a bit of crying? What's a little bit of burnt food? We're all good. And even just that little tiny moment of like, it's fine, we're all good. It just really diffuses it in a way.
And laughter and lightness, I think remembering that we can access that also helps. I can remember when my best friend had her third baby, and her second born is still one of my most favorite humans on the planet, this most delicious child. And she was 18 months old at the time, and here's her baby brother, and he's only a few hours old. And the nurse brings the tray of food for my best friend, her lunch or something. And the 18-month-old, just with her exuberance, apple juice goes everywhere, off the tray, all over the baby that's a few hours old, all over the mother. And my best friend looked at her husband, and they both just burst out laughing. I have never forgotten it. There was not an ounce. It was just beautiful. And I have watched them laugh at calamity over and over again. And it always stays with me how, if we can, I mean, obviously not if someone's life's in danger, that's different.
No.
The burnt food and the crying because a toy got taken, or, the things that where the child's not in danger. We can just go, and have a bit of a laugh, because we can, laughter's so helpful and healing.
It really is. And then I guess it stops us being so emotionally involved in everything, because you're right, there are situations around us that can be intense or demanding or whatever, and if we get emotionally dragged into all of them, then we'd be a mess, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, should we go into some of the questions? Okay, so I feel like with a lot of the listener questions, we have actually covered a lot of them. So if they weren't obvious, listeners, they were in there, all right? But should we do a couple that, aren't going to take a whole podcast? Okay.
But Godspeed to Libby, who is going to take each one and then have to distill it down. But also we'll put all the links in the show notes. We'll put previous episode with Dr. Libby in the show notes. We'll put a link to BioBlends and Libby's website and Fix Iron First. And just remember, everyone, I think I counted about 16 books on your website. So if your question does not get answered, chances are
it will be in one of the books.
It'll be in a book.
Yeah. Okay, here's one that I think is quite good. When someone is already exhausted, is exercise supportive or stressful?
So that you don't want to deplete yourself further. If you're already you feel like you're in burnout, it's that kind of level, then movement is beautiful, but full throttle exercise might not be what is ideal for that person. Exercise is not my area of expertise. I've worked with lots of experts. But I guess from a nervous system support perspective, I'd be looking at more restorative practices. So things like restorative yoga, breath focus practices. You want your exercise to energize you, not deplete you. So if you smash it, if you feel even more exhausted, if you smashed at the end of it, it probably wasn't the best choice for you in the state that you're in. So seek more restoration for now is what I would encourage.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, this one's about sugar cravings. Why do sugar cravings sometimes feel so uncontrollable, and what are they really signaling in the body?
So it can be different for different people. Sometimes it's because you've been on a blood sugar roller coaster across the day. So stress hormones and caffeine can push blood sugar to elevate, and then we plummet afterwards. Or it can be that you ate some carbohydrate-rich foods that were really quickly digested and they spike the blood sugar, and then it plummets because it's got nowhere else to go other than rock bottom. And so it's the body seeking more glucose to top up levels. So it can be a blood sugar roller coaster. So evening that out by eating more whole real food, including protein and fats with each meal, can make a big difference if that's the driver of it. For other people, the craving of sugar is, we can be insulin resistant, which is where, so insulin is a hormone that's made to maintain the amount of sugar in the blood, and insulin grabs the sugar that's in the blood from what we've eaten, and the insulin takes it firstly to our muscles, and we store it there as glycogen. And if there's any glucose sugar left over in the blood that's got to get out of there, insulin will take it and pop it in body fat cells, which have an infinite capacity to expand in size, which is why insulin is referred to as a growth hormone, because it makes cells grow. So that was very helpful when we lived through famines. It's a lot trickier to manage when we live in this world of plenty with way too much ultra processed food on tap 24/7. But if someone's cells if they start to go deaf to insulin signaling, we can also end up having a scenario called leptin resistance. And leptin resistance is where we've lost the ability to hear a satiety signal. So you've had enough to eat, it's being made, leptin is being made to say that, but you can't hear it anymore. So it can be a combination of insulin resistance and leptin resistance. And again, the solution to that, if you like, is similar. It's dietary change, it's movement. There are nutritional supplements that can help. I'm just always hesitate to talk about them because I think people have this tendency to think, well, I'll just keep eating all the junk and I'll just...
Yeah, but I'll pop a supplement on and then we'll be right. Yeah.
But there is some good research looking at a substance called myo-inositol, about 2 grams twice a day, to improve insulin resistance. But you do need to do the dietary change work as well.
Yeah. Yeah. This one here is my favorite question, but I think you've actually covered it, but maybe we could just sprinkle a little bit more detail. Someone just said coffee. So I think this person is obviously like, I don't think coffee is good for us. I'm going to rephrase it for them. Is there a place for coffee?
Yes.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, there is. Of course there is. So it's where there is no one blanket way for us all to eat, for us all to live, exercise. We need to tune in to what works for us. And there's good things that caffeine does, as a coffee, for example. So it can help with bile production, for example. The liver produces bile. Bile is very important for the emulsification and digestion of fats and fat-soluble problematic substances. That's just one example of a good thing that coffee does, and it does it through its bitterness, its bitter flavor profile. So that's a good thing. But it also, as we talked about earlier, leads us to produce adrenaline. So if you are truly a chilled out person, you just don't sweat the small stuff, truly, then coffee probably does help you to concentrate a bit better for a couple of hours. Whereas if you are already quite anxious, you might feel like in your work or in your home life, you're the person who has to remember everything. And so you have this sort of heightened state that you live with all the time that you might like, or maybe you don't like it. So there's already this background level of adrenaline in your life, or it might be from really, truly, stressful things that have got traumatic things that have gone on. You might have this background level of adrenaline. If you have caffeine on top of that, it can lead you to make more adrenaline and put you into a very uncomfortable place. So my message to people around coffee is just get really honest with yourself about how it's affecting you. And you might be absolutely fine with 1 or even 2 cups a day. It's unlikely that you will truly thrive with more than that, because it does pull minerals out of the body. So it does increase our mineral requirements. Things like magnesium, calcium can get pulled out of the body from caffeine. So yeah, just be honest with yourself about how it affects you. I remember when I wrote Rushing Woman Syndrome in 2011, because I had to be one to write the book, I could not handle caffeine in any form. It put me into a very uncomfortable place. Whereas now, no problem. But my life looks very different now. But I will always check in, and it's just and that's where our intuition, if you like, is truly our best friend. It's just we don't always like what it says. So if the intuition does say, I think you need a break from this, we don't always want to hear it. So we don't always act on it. And I guess part of my work is helping the things get out of the way so that as women, we can hear that voice and trust that voice and act on that voice more often. Not always, perfectly, more often.
Yeah. I remember seeing a wonderful kind of holistic health person years ago, and she said very similar things to coffee. She just said, if you are getting a lot of joy from this cup of coffee, and you're having a coffee with friends in the weekend, or it's a really beautiful moment of joy for you in the morning, then have it. But if you're like, oh, I just can't focus without it, and you feel like you need another one to get through the day, and it's this kind of adds to the stress, and she was like, maybe not so much. Maybe it's not the right thing. And it's so true. It all just comes back to intuition, doesn't it? So much of it does. Libby, we've taken up a lot of your time. So we should probably wrap it up. And there were some questions we didn't get to, but I truly think we covered quite a lot of them in the body of the podcast. So Libby, thank you so much for being with us again today. It's always just such a joy speaking to you.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to chat with both of you as well, and for everything you bring to the world through your own life experiences and you're so generous with what you share with the world through what you all live through and share and love to talk about. And yeah, the way you laugh together is very fun for us all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Libby. Sometimes too generous, some might say. But thank you so much, Libby. We so appreciate it. And we'll add all of Libby's links into the show notes so you know where to find her and where to find the BioBlend supplements, which are wonderful. So thank you, Libby.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care out there, everybody. Speak soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Untidy. If you enjoyed it, we'd love your support to keep making the show. The best thing you can do to help is subscribe by hitting follow in your podcast app and leaving us a little 5-star review. You can also now watch and subscribe on YouTube and check out how these millennials are keeping up with the cool kids on TikTok and the gram. Lastly, please share this podcast with your mates. It means that we can keep building this supportive community, keep giving you untidy episodes, and just keep doing what we love to do.
Don't forget to check out mybigmoments.com for kids' books that make your tricky job of parenting a whole lot easier. Untidy listeners get a discount at checkout, so just pop in Untidy for 10% off your order. Lastly, we would like to thank all of the good people who make this podcast possible. Flicker Williams and Joe Rocker at My Big Moments for the beautiful artwork and design, Maxine London Creative for editing this episode, and Lana Byrne for creating our social content. And to you, our listeners, Araha nui, take care. We'll see you soon.